let me first say that you know that we've been doing this for 42 years, and you know that, well, you know now how much of a challenge it is. And to bring critical thinking in any significant way to any setting, not to an individual person. In other words, we are reaching individual persons, at least at some level. I'm not saying at a high level, but at some level, where they're using the tools and actively benefiting from them. I know that there are some people who are doing this, but I'm afraid to say that the number is few and far between. And our history, we have been working, when I say we, I mean the Foundation for Critical Thinking, has been working to teach teachers critical thinking for over 42 years, and to help administrators see the importance of placing critical thinking at the heart of teaching and learning. And in that time, we have had, I would say, to be generous, a small handful of longer term programs. But for the most part, people have expected their critical thinking within one day. Teach me critical thinking within one day. Teach me critical thinking within 2 days. Or let's go back from that. Why don't you just teach it to us in an hour? We set a whole hour aside for critical thinking. You see, this is the mindset that we are up against. And we're up against it again and again and again. And until people realize that you're reasoning all day long, and that means you're thinking, but you need to bring criticality to that reasoning process. And when you understand that, when you understand the role that reasoning is playing in everyday life, then you begin to see the importance of having reasonable standards for determining what to accept and what to reject as thoughts into the mind. So in other words, one of the main things that humans do is reason. And yet it's one of the things that we are virtually ignoring. We're taking it for granted. Everyone takes their thinking for granted. And people, insofar as they want critical thinking, they want it for the other person. They want it for their neighbor. They want it for their students. They want it for their wives or their husbands. But very few people are saying, I need critical thinking skills and abilities and characteristics. And until we're at that point, we are slapdashing at critical thinking. We have, we're using the term now widely in critical thinking. I mean, the term critical thinking widely in human life. And now almost every school, college, university says that they're fostering critical thinking now. So we are using the term widely, but if you ask anyone, what is critical thinking? Then you'll see a bit of a stumble and a bit of a fall, if not a crash. So there's no response, or there's little response, or some bit of a response. So when we're trying to teach, let's say, or not teach, but convince administrators of the importance of bringing critical thinking into their work, we have to remember that, first of all, there is no place for critical thinking in K-12 schooling, as far as I can tell. There's no room for it. There's no way to bring it in. It's considered to be part of the curriculum now, built into all of these textbooks. But look at what is passing for critical thinking, and you'll know that we have a mainly superficial conception of it that's percolating all around K-12 schooling. And so critical thinking is not part of the bought curriculum. which is what K-12 teachers mainly use. And unfortunately, the vision that our founder, Richard Paul, and others had in the 1980s were coming on the heels of the 1970s, was that we were going to actually revolutionize education through critical thinking. And of course, sadly, we are very far from that. And we've gone in many ways backwards because we're focusing on teaching to the test. We're testing students ad nauseum. We're squeezing out any room for critical thinking. So first of all, there's no room for it. Second of all, there's almost no funding for it. So I've always said this, that I don't want much for critical thinking in terms of education. I'm not asking for much. What I'm asking for is about the amount that we spend on athletics. So if you give us that amount, I will be happy. But you see, we don't have money for developing the intellect. We don't have money to develop the ethical character of the people. And so critical thinking, there's no room for it in the curriculum. There's no funding for it. And the people who would have to push it forward to make it happen themselves do not have a conception of it. So we're having to teach those people a conception of it. And for them to learn a conception of, they have to be open to learning. And so even the people who come to us and are interested in critical thinking often are not able to follow through because they don't have the intellectual perseverance. But at least they're on, at least they're on the ladder. But you're trying to get people that actually aren't even on the ladder. And those people are much harder to get into this way of thinking. And I will say something else about colleges of education. Now, I could say this broadly for, and I talked a little bit about K-12 schooling, but I haven't talked about higher education. We have similar problems now in higher education because they've become highly politicized. I mean, these classes have become highly politicized. And we don't, as far as I can tell, have what I would call actual freedom of speech and freedom of thought. We're not advancing those things, not to any significant degree. What we're doing is we're asking, how does this college or university address the economic needs of the community? Are we able to put these people to work? So that means that our colleges and universities end up being basically training schools. What's the difference? Is this right? So it's a vocational school. And that's, you see, we're not even discussing much the conception of liberal education anymore. The concept of liberality, being a liberal-minded thinker itself has got a black eye, so to speak, in terms of the way that people are using language. So you see, I wanted to tell you this because I wanted to first commiserate with you and to help you see where you are in history as you try to make this happen. So for you, once you were introduced to the work, you could see, for me, I use the term, I could see finally the real gold. I mean, I had been exposed to the fool's gold. And when I saw the real gold, I mean, when I could actually see it, when I was able to push past my biases and to say, well, that's incredible. We've got elements of reasoning and we've got intellectual standards we can use. Well, let's use those then. You see, so you see that, and then we see the intellectual virtues and then the theory. But I'm just saying that, so once you see that, at least at some level, you see the power or the potential for the classroom. And now you're very excited and you want to tell people, and it's like obvious now, but it's not obvious to anyone else. And when we hold our webinars in our community online, and we have open discussion. When people are asked to talk about any questions they have or problems they have, other than problems about the theory, they very frequently go to this question: why is it so hard for me to get my colleagues, etc.,
Yeah.
to hear me? You know, and it's like a sadness, it's like a crying out. And this is a every time thing, and it's been going on for decades. It's been going on for centuries, and you can take it back to Socrates and further, of course, where Socrates was just banging his head against the wall to get people to see that it's your reasoning, people. We've got to focus on our reasoning. That's where the answers are. We can't count on the gods to tell us how to behave because they don't agree. So we've got to use our own mind. And that's why we have it, you know. And so he, at the end, after being condemned to die, right? His colleagues say, or his students say, well, you know, you can run, you can go. And the idea was that hopefully that the powers that be were hoping he would escape. But yes, Socrates, I think at that point was very tired, in the way that I think Mandela was tired. You know, Mandela came out and had envisioned a different world. The world that he had fought for was not the world realized. So I'm afraid that that's the story of the human experience.